One, and live.
Good morning and welcome to the Prince's Trust Diversity and Inclusion Talk. My name's Keeman and I will be your host today. Today we have a special edition Black History Month discussion panel. I'm super excited to hear from the lineup. We have 4 amazing panelists, but first I'd like to introduce myself and my story. My name is Keeman Allen and I've been part of the Trust for many years now. I first got in contact with the Prince's Trust as a 22-year-old with a big business idea and nowhere to turn. I came across the Prince's Trust online and they helped me put a business plan and a cash flow together to launch my very first business, which was a carbon neutral urban clothing label. And I received a business mentor for 2 years and I'm still friends with my business mentor to this day. The Prince's Trust helped me do exactly what I wanted to do. They gave me the fundamental skills I needed to build my dream into a reality. I was asked then to become a young ambassador for the Prince's Trust, and then fast forward 5 years, I decided that I was going to focus on family rather than work, and I decided to adopt my daughter at 6 months old, and who is going to be 9 this month. From then, I began to work for the Prince's Trust as a young ambassador and an outreach executive. So I've gone full circle with the Prince's Trust, and now I'm able to help young people and inspire them to achieve their dreams just as I did. So today, I'm more than looking forward to this special edition of Prince's Trust Talks. The Prince's Trust is the largest youth charity in the UK, and we support thousands of young people aged 11 to 30 to help them into employment, to start something with confidence, courses and career. The Prince's Trust's vision is that every young person should have the chance to succeed, and I agree. To celebrate the Greater Manchester Centre reopening for face-to-face delivery, we want to thank the Future Workforce Fund, a groundbreaking 2-year initiative that tests innovative ways of delivering support for young people in the Greater Manchester area. Future Workforce Fund aims to transform young lives in the Greater Manchester. If you have any remote roles over the UK or within the Greater Manchester area, please do get in touch with us and the Get Hired team. This is a quick message for young people on the call today, or anybody who works with young people. There is no such thing as a stupid question. If you have a business idea or would like to explore what it takes to become an entrepreneur, please do get in touch with our customer service team. Now today I want you to think about the takeaway you will get from this talk. Let's be willing to have an open conversation, to educate ourselves, but most important, we need to take measurable actions. To all on the call today, have a pen and paper ready and take notes how you and your organisation can make a change. Throughout the talk, pop your questions in the chat box on the right-hand side, and we'll pick them up in the last 15 minutes. This talk will be recorded and put onto YouTube after with subtitles available. Now, let's get into it. Let's introduce our amazing panelists today. We'll start with Chanel. Chanel, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Keeman, for that. It's so lovely for me to be here. I'm here on behalf of my role as Head of Programs for the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust. Many of you will know about the Trust. If not, I'm sure everyone here knows about Stephen Lawrence. I'm the Head of Programs. We do a lot of high impact programs working with young people, community leaders, and those interested in pursuing careers in the built environment and wider. My personal identity is I'm Black Caribbean. My Blackness means that I have ancestry, of course, in Africa, and my direct culture or my direct ethnicity is I am Dominican on one half of my family, and on the other half, I'm St. Lucian, and I'm 100% proud of both of those things, and I'm really happy to be here today.
Thank you so much, Chanel. Henry, over to you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here. My name is Henry Agbo, and I'm a program manager at Apple. So I work on consumer financing and our banking relationships. In addition, I'm the co-chair of Black at Apple in the UK, which is one of our employee diversity network associations. I just want to say that, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here on this Black History Month panel. I think anytime we have an opportunity to share our stories with each other and the world, we have to take it. And I definitely think we should, as Black people, people of the African diaspora, talk about the ways in which we've contributed to British society. So if I think about my identity, I identify as Black. I was born in the US to Nigerian parents, so I can trace my ancestry back because it's pretty near and dear to my heart, my culture, as a Nigerian and as an American, and now as a Brit. So a lot of different things going on there, but all of them, I think, make up who I am, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much, Henry. Over to you, Sideman. Welcome.
Hello, people. My name is Sideman. Also coleslaw, garlic bread, all things to the side you can refer to me as. And I am a comedian and a broadcaster and a presenter. And my identity, I was born in Jamaica. That's where I grew up. And now I've moved to the UK. So just making that transition from Jamaican to Brit constantly. Because I still, even though I've been here since I was 12, there's certain things I still haven't gotten used to, such as the cold, but I'm working on it. I'm working and I'm getting there. But yeah, very thankful for being on the panel. And as Henry was saying, I think that these conversations are great to have, and it's great to have the platform to have them, especially to be able to have them and have businesses and organizations listening, because they are a big part of how we will help to make change happen. So very thankful for being here.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And last but not least, Emma, how you doing? You with us, Emma?
Sorry, I just realized I was on mute. Hi guys, my name is Emma Campy. I started with the Prince's Trust on the Business Enterprise Program, and I decided I wanted to kind of like take a bit of a spin from the corporate world and start my own business in makeup artistry. Whilst I was on the enterprise program, it's been phenomenal since. Like, I've had an amazing mentor, and I've had like tons of support from the Prince's Trust, and not to mention the fact that I've got to be a youth ambassador and join and be a part of like these amazing events like today. And my identity is I am Ugandan by heritage, by blood, and I'm born and raised in the UK in London. So I have like, I think like I'm very close to both in general. And yeah, I'm hoping that today we'll be able to, a lot of companies will be able to take away like great insights to how they can make a positive change.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Now let's get into it. Janelle, as someone who has experienced helping the Black talent succeed as a program manager for the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust, can you set the scene and the current landscape for BAME people within the world of work?
Thank you for that question. So yeah, I'm really interested and excited to talk about this answer. So I think for everyone here today on this call, I know everyone's here in different capacities. What I'd like to start by saying is that with or without access to reports, data, facts and figures, everyone here today knows or has the capacity to know that the current landscape within the world of work for Black people and people who are Asian and minority ethnic is one that is unequal. I think that isn't a surprise for anybody today on October the 1st, 2020. When we explore that inequality though, I think it's really important to start by looking at the fact that the data and the reports that do exist, the nature by which that data is collected and presented can sometimes have inequality entrenched into it itself. So if we start with education, which is usually a good place to start, and when looking at the landscape, because it's the first place in which the journey of different peoples can be assessed with any sort of comparable metrics. The official national statistics concerning education sometimes can be a bit challenging with their groupings, because they will group, for example, Black people together as one group. Whereas if we compare that, for example, to in that same set of statistics, data about Asian people, they're separated into Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Chinese, Indian, and other Asian. So sometimes the way that the data is even grouped can be unhelpful to really paint a true picture about the place that we're in. But that being said, upon entry to primary education, what we focus on sometimes is when people leave education, but upon entry to primary education, many people might not know that Black Caribbean pupils have amongst the highest literacy rates By the time they get to the end of that school machine, however, they rank as the lowest, if not amongst the lowest of the ethnic groups. So the question is, what does the education system do to have a group that ranks so highly at the start, rank so low at the end of that journey? Also, it's really important to note that when we're looking at the world of work and it starts with education for most people, we have to think about people's identities in the intersectional sense. Oftentimes we talk about Blackness as a monolith and as one group, but actually we don't take into consideration that there are differences with different social classes. So anybody here who has any sort of history or understanding of what's happening in education will know that there's a focus on white working class groups or white working class boys. But the privilege of being focused on with different social classes isn't something that's afforded to most other ethnic or racial groups apart from whiteness in this country. And I think it's something that's really important to think about. Sometimes the barriers, or oftentimes the barriers, are socioeconomic, but the kind of blame is placed on somebody's racial identity, for want of a better term. So also when we look at education, the children in the education system who are being failed, we look at the staff of that education system. In the UK, only approximately 3.5% of head teachers are Black, Asian or minority ethnic. When we compare that to the 15% of the population that they take up, we see a picture that it needs to change and it needs to become more representative. So we take people through the education system and then we leave, and then we look at data about people who are not in education, employment or training, the acronym for which is NEET, and also unemployment. When all BAME groups are put together, there are actually fewer BAME people that are NEET than white groups. However, when we examine their ethnicities individually, we find that Black ethnicities and Pakistani and Bangladeshi groups have a higher proportion of people who are NEET than white groups. That comes from ethnicityfactsandfigures.gov.uk. And then when we also look into people in employment itself, in senior positions, Black employees of all different ethnicities hold only 1.5% of top management roles in the UK private sector. And that's increased only 0.1% since 2014. If we compare that to the fact that Black people have 3% of the UK population, those figures are not good enough. Only 1% of journalists, senior civil servants, judges, academics, and the police force are Black. Again, very unrepresentative when we think about the proportion of the population that they hold. So there are obviously barriers that Black people, with the beautiful diversity of ethnicities that we have, that make up this group, face when entering work, when in education from the earliest stages, when climbing to senior positions, and also when receiving the professional development and support that other groups can expect to enjoy and also do enjoy in reality. So whilst those barriers, or these barriers, disproportionately impact and impede the successes of Black people and people who are Black, Asian and minority ethnic do not erect these barriers in front of ourselves. That is something that we have to remember. So they do still exist. So some key questions that we have to reflect upon, and more importantly, act on after we've reflected on them, are: who is involved in keeping these barriers in place? Who is involved? What is involved in keeping these barriers in place? What actions should be taken to take these barriers down and to remove them? And when will your organization start that necessary work or increase the rate of that necessary work of barrier removal? So what I know is there's no shortage of data available at the end of a very quick Google search. The data and the figures can easily be known. The inequalities that exist, they're not things that we could only know recently. That being said, we have to make sure that we don't focus only on collecting data, but acting upon things. So instead of asking, for example, why don't Black people stay in companies and why don't Black people make it to senior roles, we should ask, why do companies exclude Black people from senior roles and why do they do poorly in retaining Black talent? If we shift the way that we ask these questions, we will elicit different answers, and we will also find out that the action and the responsibility for action sits with people who are on this call today, which is something that's really, really exciting. So in my role at the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust, and with my kind of fabulous colleagues that I work with as well, we understand that talent is everywhere, opportunity isn't everywhere. So at the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust, we actually do tangible actions to create a fairer and more inclusive society in which everyone can succeed, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, or other elements of their identity and background. Some of the actions and tangible solutions that we actually focus on, we partner with organizations to provide work for people who are underprivileged. They need jobs, they need roles, they need entrepreneurship opportunities. We work in schools to raise aspirations for Black, Asian, minority, ethnic or underprivileged young people. We provide bursarial and scholarship support for those for whom material money limitations are a barrier. We provide ongoing professional development. It's not just about getting people into the door, but there needs to be representation at all levels of seniority. There shouldn't be a concentration of Black staff or Black, Asian, and minority ethnic staff only in the junior roles of any organization. That paints a picture that demonstrates that things need to change. We also...
Thank you, Chanel. Sorry.
That's okay.
Just need to slightly move on there, but it's very
course.
interesting and the statistics speak for themselves. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Henry, as a co-chair of Black at Apple Diversity Network, can you share some insights and successful ways in which you foster a sense of community to employ, retain, and develop talent?
Yeah, I absolutely am happy to do that. I think what Chanel was saying is spot on. I think as we think about getting people, young Black people in particular, into work, one of the things that we have to start to question and ask ourselves is, how are we retaining them? How are we developing them? And how are we growing them? And I think what we have discovered at Black at Apple, which is a diversity network association at Apple, comprised of course, Black employees, but also allies. What we've discovered is that it cannot just be about recruiting people into the organization, right? So our focus has become, how do we create programming that's relevant to the community that exists there? So for example, we have a leadership team that are dedicated to different pillars. We call them the pillars of purpose. So there'll be a team focused on building and fostering a sense of community amongst employees at Apple, a team focused on talent and talent development, a team focused on volunteering and giving and how do we interact with the broader Black community here in the UK, and others. And I think when we think about the kind of those teams organized according to those pillars of purpose, you start to gain some traction and some momentum, because it's Black people coming together and also kind of dictating to the organization, like, what are the needs of our community in all of these different areas. Of course, the responsibility doesn't lie on us, right? Like, it is not our job to recruit talent that looks like us. It's not necessarily our job to figure out ways to keep them there. But I think what we do really well is we partner with those people in the organization, whether it's recruiting or whether it's, HR, or our inclusion and diversity as an organization, we partner with these teams to kind of be the voice of the community and say, this is what the community is saying that it needs. This is how we think we can support. And I think that has been really powerful, because it's not only necessarily up to the kind of leaders to say, oh, well, this is what we think is good, or this is what we think is. It's also giving all of us as employees a voice and a role to play within that. And I think, to me, this is kind of fundamental, right? So particularly in organizations where you don't see a large number of people who look like us, you want to make sure that you really focus in on, like, fostering that sense of community, but also empowering that community. And I think that's where we've seen a lot of great wins. Our community is currently 1,600 people strong, and we've seen that grow pretty dramatically in the past year, particularly as questions of racial justice have moved into the forefront of everyone's consciousness. And so I think we had the kind of foundational elements there, and what we've been able to do is kind of build on them as more people have kind of become engaged with our organization. We've been able to kind of influence and think about and work on the direction that Apple as an organization is taking in some of these key areas.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And I quite like the fact that Apple have these pillars of purpose. Who knew? Maybe it's something that I'll try and adapt in my own organization. Thank you very much, Henry.
Of course.
Sideman, as an accomplished presenter and household name, what barriers have you faced on your journey, and how have you overcome these?
I've faced many barriers. If just away from blackness, just even just having the Birmingham accent and then going into a scene that is London heavy, where I've been told everything in the book. I've been told the Birmingham accent is worse than having chlamydia. So, you know, I've heard everything in the book. But as it pertains to my blackness and in terms of barriers, you know, it's hard to say that I saw them as barriers rather than just I saw them as how life is, because to pretend like we've ever existed in a fair world is just preposterous. Fair is a notion, it's a theory. Fair is like a concept and an idea that we aspire to, but it's never been our reality. And even though I was brought up in Jamaica, it was always explained to me from a very young age that as a black person, you will have to work harder. And this translates in the workplace in ways that are very subtle and subconscious even to us. So we dilute our blackness in the workplace. We have our white voice for interviews and phone calls, and we do the things that we feel like we need to do to survive in the workplace, whether it is to bite our tongue. In fact, I was a tongue biter for a long time. I was a tongue biter in many different aspects about many different things, and many things went past, right, that happened to me in the workplace that I didn't address, because at that point in my life, it's almost like we feel even the rights that we do have, we don't feel like we have. Much less the rights that we need to have, the rights that we do have as black people in this country, to the things that we can do in the workplace, the fight that we can make against discrimination that we face. We still feel like we can't because we don't want to be seen as aggressive. We don't want to be seen as pushing the race card and things like that. So it's just a lot of shutting up, I would say, a lot of being quiet to things. And what I noticed in the workplace happen is that black people huddle up together amongst one another and discuss things that pertain to white supremacy and systematic oppression that we feel like our white counterparts would have no context for, because white supremacy and systematic oppression is not taught in schools. So if you haven't experienced it in actuality, then you will have no context for it. And so we kind of feel alone. And there is that feeling of aloneness when you go to work, and then you feel like when you go home, you can put your personality back on, but when you come to work, you have to kind of shred it off. So that's right. What I would say the main thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call today can actually relate to that. And it's important for people to understand that a lot of people dilute themselves to fit in. So, you know, why is it important to celebrate business and black entrepreneurship, Sideman?
Because black entrepreneurship says that there's going to be a black infrastructure that allows you to be understood, that allows you to be passionate without being seen as aggressive. You understand what I'm saying? That's why representation is so important. That's why seeing yourself represented in places is so important. Black entrepreneurship is important because when any position that a black person holds in this world, they have to understand that it's different. When you hold a position, when you do something, you are a beacon of hope to another person saying you can do that. You tell another black person that you can be something more than just a media personality or a sports personality, because that's the only thing that it seems like we're to do. And so that's why representation is so important. It's why I don't like the trickery of a lot of work, a lot of places, especially in the media, where they use people like me as a black mouthpiece to say that we are inclusive, we have black people. But when I go up and I show up to the shoot and the production, the entire production team is white. Everybody behind the camera is white. I'm just the black mouthpiece to make it look like it's not so. And so we want representation behind the camera, in front of the camera, in corporate, where there is no cameras for you to see who's in the company and who's behind the company. Because you also have companies as well that will use a lot of black influencers, but then all of their staff are white people. And so we don't just want to be glorified mouthpieces, we want to be involved from the conceptualization of ideas, because a lot of times you will see a lot of your favorite influencers, do ideas or do things that are hella corny, but it's because we were never involved in the pre-production. We get called at the end once they've come up with their ideas and set it to us. You understand? They've made the idea malleable to their audience and to how they want to show us. And so we have to be careful as well that while we're being represented as us and not just glorified mouthpieces.
Absolutely, spot on. I totally agree with everything that you're saying, and you are using your platform to promote black entrepreneurship as well. So thank you so much for that, Sideman.
Thank you.
Emma, how you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Good. As a young ambassador for the Prince's Trust, can you tell us about the work that you've accomplished, your business and career?
Yeah, sure. So I started off in the corporate world. I actually faced systematic oppression or racism in a way. And I decided, like, I went through like quite a deep, dark time period where I kind of felt really, really low. So I decided the only thing that was basically keeping me going was applying makeup in the morning. I know that sounds a bit like what, but for me, it was like the most therapeutic thing that could help me start off my day and like face the day ahead. So I decided I actually wanted to start up a business where I'd help other people who were going through similar scenarios or situations, whether it be at work or whether it be just in life in general, and like almost like trying to find that like pillar of hope to push forward. So I started up my business. My friend actually introduced me to the Prince's Trust. And so from there I decided to go on to the enterprise program and start up my business Brave Face UK, where I provide makeup artistry services and lessons and applications, sorry. And then I built up my social enterprise Brave Face UK Foundation, which is just a charity or like, yeah, social enterprise to help women or like everyone who's facing dark periods in their lives to overcome it through makeup therapy. So I've been along the journey, I've been like really, really fortunate to be involved in a lot of stuff. But in terms of the social enterprise aspect of it, I've been able to work with the Abbey Centre. So I decided to raise funds using the NatWest to back her business. And then I used the funds from there to help other women who've gone through a lot of stuff in their lives, and provide holistic, like 3 holistic makeup artistry services, or therapeutic makeup artistry services. And so to help them like give them a brave or sense of confidence and self-esteem to like carry on through the day. So yeah, that's how.
Brilliant. And how can young people on the call navigate themselves through any discriminations that they may face?
So it's really, really a tough one. I feel like I've gone through like the battle of I myself am a Black person who's been in a lot of corporate environments where I have been a victim of that. And at the beginning, kind of it goes on with what Sideman was mentioning earlier. I think probably because my mum never had that chat with me, it was almost like, and being that I went to quite a diverse secondary school, and never ever facing those scenarios ever in my life, it was like a real shock to me. I didn't actually understand what like the different behaviors were, and like why it was only happening to me. And then slowly you kind of figure out like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. So I would say if anyone's in a situation where they are being like racially discriminated against, from what I've taken from it all is a good way of making sure that you are able to like back yourself up and like support yourself throughout the whole process. I would say definitely join a union, get a union representative, so that in case of if anything were to happen, you would have someone to like actually sit with you through any of the meetings that you have, or if you were to like address something where you felt like you were racially discriminated against, you could with that union representative. I would definitely say, yeah, and the second step I would definitely say is to obviously confront that person in a politically correct way, so that you then have like almost like in a way like a receipt of, you know, you have been able to speak to that person, let that person know, or whoever it is, let them know that, you know, you're not okay with this kind of behavior, you being dealt this way. And then from there, I would say make sure that you get written like proof. So always email whoever, like email HR about the times and the dates of like whenever these situations were happening. And then from there, go ahead and speak to your manager if you feel comfortable enough. But then if not, obviously then have that meeting with HR and have your union representative backing you. And yeah, just so that you can you can make sure that you're supported throughout the whole process. Because I think it's great that obviously, like, we have human resources in companies, but something I've definitely learned throughout my journey is that sometimes, well, a lot of times HR is for the good of the company, and that's great, but you also need to make sure that you have like helped support yourself throughout the whole process, because if anything, it can kind of, you don't want it to get to a point where it's like their word against yours. So yeah.
Thank you very much. And just going back to Sideman slightly, thank you, Emma. How would you, what advice would you give to young people on the call as well, to how would they go through any discriminations that they may face? What advice would you like to give them?
I quite agree with what she was saying, because I think it's just the best way. It's the best way to make sure that you keep that documented, that you keep a log, and that you make your employers make sure you know, make sure that your employers understand you know your rights. This is something I've understood from school, because I've always, my family always said from when I was younger, I could have been a lawyer. When I was in school, a teacher said to me that their mission was to get me excluded from school. That's what the teacher said to me. Now, if you had said that to another student, I was giving trouble, but I understood at that age that you can't say that to me. And I knew how to weaponize that sentence against him. I went home and I told my dad, listen, you're going to have a meeting with this teacher and the principal. You think that it's your meeting, but it's not, it's my meeting. And I made my dad go down to the school and have a meeting with the principal and that teacher. My dad didn't even speak. Once we got into the room, I said to the principal, are you okay with having a member of staff that believes that it's okay not to tell me that it's their mission to help me improve, not to tell me that it's their mission to help me to go off the path that they feel like I'm on because of the potential that I have as a student, but it's that their mission to get me out of the school. Are you comfortable with having that member of staff? That's immediately when that member of staff started copying please, telling me their backstory and everything and saying sorry. So I feel like we have to just know our rights and know when somebody has said something wrong to you. If somebody has said a wrong sentence to you, right, you need to take that across the board and let everybody know this is what was said to me if something incorrect was said to you, because things like that get said in the workplace all the time and people feel powerless when these things are said. But if somebody has given you actual tangible evidence, something they've said to you, right, then you can start to have a conversation about that. And I just feel like what we need to do is to stop being afraid and actually understand the system that we are in. If you are in any kind of proper workplace, they can't fire you for having a problem. That's why HR exists, right? You can't just be fired for having an issue. But what we fear oftentimes is being seen as problematic, but that's a weapon against us to keep us quiet, because they don't want us to talk, because we might have an actual legitimate claim. Once you know your claim is legitimate, it's time to speak up.
Great point. Thank you so much. Chanel, how can Black talent add value to companies?
Thank you so much. Thanks for that question. So if I just reflect and think about that question for a little while, I think in the simplistic sense, Black talent is talent. So, you know, I know almost confidently that that question could and would never be posed if we were to swap Black for white. How can white talent add value to companies? I just don't think that question would ever be asked. And the reasons, or perhaps some of the reasons for that, is that white people, and to varying degrees other groups, have the privilege of being recognized as individuals, and they're awarded on the merit of their performance in the competitive recruitment process that they're participating in. So that gets them into a job, helps them to remain in a job, to be developed in and progress within whichever company or organization. So that is something that is afforded to other groups, and that should be afforded to Black groups without them having to have an additional metric to prove that their Blackness also has to add some sort of value to a company. If I also reflect back on my answer to the first question that was posed of me today, rather than kind of questioning the Black talent itself to prove its worth to a company, that's an additional hurdle or metric that other groups don't have, or have to a lesser degree. We should perhaps think about if a Black person, or better still, a multitude of Black people have successfully demonstrated their value to a company in a competitive recruitment process, the answer is self-evidential. But what we also know, everyone here today, or at least could know, is that the reality of the situation is that so many companies and organizations and situations fail to attract, fail to retain, fail to promote to a senior level representative number of Black talent. So From my personal experience and from the experience of myself and my kind of colleagues at the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust, to answer the question, how can Black talent add value to companies? I think the first thing I want to say is that your company will have the benefit of not being a racially exclusive company that leaves a group out. That is a benefit. And that's something that would leave you or your organization with kind of less shame. You also benefit from having additional cultural and ethnic and individual lived experiences in your company. I am Black completely. I have lots of Black friends and lots of loved ones from a range of different ethnicities. However, if I am the only Black person in a company, I couldn't speak with any sort of authority on the experiences of somebody who is Antiguan, Zimbabwean, Ghanaian, Haitian, Nigerian, Gambian, because I'm none of those things. Even though what I share with that group of people is Blackness, I can't speak on behalf of everybody. If those people are in the room, they can add their lived experience, which is a beautiful thing. Also, kind of to hark back to something that Sideman was speaking about before, having Black people in the earlier stages in the decision-making processes will have different decisions being made, will have different ideas being made that won't lead to perhaps the cringier outcomes that Sideman kind of referred to when you're seeing some campaigns, perhaps where they bring the Black talent in at the very last stage. If they were in at the earlier stages, the decisions would perhaps be a bit more reflective and inclusive and make a bit more sense to a wider audience of people. That's a positive thing for an organization that doesn't just relate to influencers, that relates to all types of organizations in all different industries. We just change the words, but the principles remain the same. Also, you have fewer people from different ethnic and racial backgrounds feeling isolated or tokenized within a company. And that's also a positive thing for the majority group and for the minority group. Everyone feels that they're being included. That's a positive thing. If we also think about the business case, which a lot of people perhaps will want to focus on, from the Race in the Workplace study, if we ever realized the kind of the concept of equality, which, Sideman mentioned, it isn't something that we've experienced, but if we got to the stage of experiencing it, kind of estimated guesses from that report suggest that the UK will potentially bring in £24 billion boost annually to the economy, which is the equivalent of 1.3% of the GDP. Also, companies that have a more diverse and representative and inclusive team at all levels of seniority have approximately 35% better financial returns. I guess some of the things that organizations can do to get to these stages where people are feeling included, and also if the business case is what you're focusing on, you can get to those positive results. Some of the steps that should happen are non-Black people and people who are not BAME, educate yourself and check your privilege. Just be honest and reflective. There's a lot of education resources. There's no shortage of things available. Kind of educate yourself. People can't add value if they're not in the company. So have the people in the company. Bring them into the company in a meaningful way. Recruit Black people, recruit people who are Asian and minority ethnic as well. Not as if you're doing them a favor, but because it's the right thing to do. Create an inclusive environment for people once they're in that company. That's another thing, is don't just get them in the door, make the environment inclusive, stamp out the racism that most likely exists, rather than deny its existence or underplay it. Be honest about your starting point. Don't just kind of immediately announce yourself to be an anti-racist organization if you haven't done the work. Go through the integrity of doing the work so that you can, at the end of that process, which isn't a quick fix, easy process, have the privilege of wearing the badge of honor to say that that's the organization that you're in. There's a 6 kind of step process. You could also say, gather data, take accountability, examine and change your recruitment processes. If your team is unrepresentative, there's something that is favoring the group that is overrepresented. Change it. Change the processes that exist, obtain external support, and also raise awareness. There are so many different things. Learn from the organizations that are doing it well. Some organizations are fantastically representative and inclusive. Learn from the principles of what they're doing. Even if they're in a different industry, they are doing something right. And you can kind of adopt some of those things. The Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust has a Building Inclusive Futures Consulting. We work with organizations, but the organizations we work with them if they are committed to making long-term change. We don't just come in and do a quick session on unconscious bias. Everyone feels good and we go home. We want people to actually pledge to make systematic change. Many organizations have joined us and have started to make that change, and they've started to bear the fruits of that real work and that real action. So I encourage organizations here to be honest with your starting point and to make those actual changes And when people are in, don't just be happy that you have Black people that's at the junior level. The representation should be the full range of seniority, the full range of roles. And you're not giving people a favor, you're actually doing something that is the right thing to do. So don't make the talent that you attract feel like you've been given the role because we're diversifying and that's why you're here. No, actually, you've been given the role because you're a talented individual and we as an organization are better for having you here.
Chanel, that was absolutely fantastic. If I was an emoji, I'll be the clapping hands right now. Like, absolutely spot on. Thank you so much. Henry, how important is it for young people to create a strong network? And what is the value of mentorship for both mentee and mentor?
Great. Hey, I'll start with like a little personal narrative on that subject. So I grew up in a pretty Black neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri in the US. And I think like my parents are both Nigerian immigrants. And what I saw them do was like, they always managed their relationships with other people really well. So my dad and my mom were both really involved in like the Nigerian Cultural Association of St. Louis. And, you know, there were a number of people in that organization who ran the gamut, from people who were professionals, doctors, lawyers, nurses, to people who had other jobs, you know, who were starting their own business, you know, people who were fresh from Nigeria, who didn't have a lot and had come to America to make a new life. And I think watching them interact with such a broad range of people, both within their kind of Nigerian community, but also within our broader neighborhood and schools, it kind of instilled in me this value of like relationship building and what does that mean and why is it important? And I think what I took away from that is it's really important because you can share things, you can learn things, you can make your own situation better. And so I really feel like that kind of instilled in me this value of, you know, seeking out networks. And so what that looked like for me as I was growing up are a couple of organizations, both US based, that really had a pretty profound impact on my life and my ability to get where I am today in terms of business. One of those organizations is called Inroads, and it starts quite early in the sense that it's kind of high school age. Probably, I think, senior in high school, so 16, 17, and on up. And what they do is they expose you to different career paths. They give you opportunities to meet different companies. You have the opportunity to go to networking camps, to CV building camps, that kind of thing. And so getting involved in that organization, I think, really helped me understand the value of like, how am I going to make it into the business world? And obviously we had different cohorts of students who would participate in that program, and just staying connected to them as they moved into different organizations or got different internships was really valuable. I continued that same sort of thing with another organization called Management Leadership for Tomorrow. And they kind of do a similar thing, but whereas Inroads tends to be regionally focused, Management Leadership for Tomorrow was kind of countrywide focused. And I think there, the idea is like, again, you kind of get some additional support focused on Black and minority talent to really help them kind of understand the business world, particularly those of us who did not come from that background or whose parents did not have that background. And so I feel like from there, I still have friends, contacts from those organizations that I kind of speak to and work with today, who I refer to jobs, who have referred me to jobs in the past. And so I think for me, that has really been a crucial piece of kind of foundational work that helped me to get to where I am. But then, of course, I left the US and I moved to the UK. And in many ways, it felt like I was starting over. Because I'm not from here, I moved here 8 years ago. And I think, you know, I didn't know that many people here. So I really had to kind of work at restarting and building my network. And I kind of did that, you know, ground level. I really just thought about, you know, what connections I could make, who I could meet, you know, what friends I did have here and who they could introduce me to. And I think that, you know, what I found from that in terms of its importance is like, you never really know where a relationship or a conversation can lead you. I certainly didn't think that I was like the prime candidate for a place like Apple. And it was only through, you know, my network and, you know, being really active on LinkedIn and really nurturing the people who I was, I knew and was, you know, exposed to, was I able to like navigate my way into this space. So that's kind of for me, the kind of learning about networking. In terms of mentorship and, you know, what value that gives to the mentor and the mentee, I think, you know, a lot of companies try to do really formalized mentorship programs, right? So like pairing someone with, you know, a senior executive or something like this. And I guess those things are great. I think formalized mentorship programs are great, but where I have seen success is kind of in the informal, right? So really thinking about, you know, what draws you to someone? How do you kind of, how can you relate to that person? And I think oftentimes you can use things like, you know, one's heritage or one's racial background. So if somebody is Black and in a more senior position than me, of course, I'm going to want to seek them out. I might feel more comfortable kind of talking to them, but I don't necessarily need like an established mentor-mentee relationship. It might just mean, hey, I'm going to text you if I have an issue or a question or a challenge. And I think that when you create these relationships where people really don't necessarily feel pressured or compelled to, then I think that's where you get the most out of it. Of course, I think as Chanel very eloquently put it, you kind of need people at all levels of the organization for that kind of thing to work. You need Black people in all levels of the organization to make that come to fruition. So I think, of course, it's really, really important to make sure that, you know, when you think about your recruiting and you think about the composition of your workforce, that you've got Black people and people of color represented throughout the spectrum of it. But certainly, I think when I think about mentor-mentee relationships, I almost kind of veer towards like making them feel natural and beneficial to both parties.
Brilliant, thank you, Henry. There's so many takeaways that organisations on the calls today can actually start implementing straight away. So thank you so much for that. Sideman, how can we break down stereotypes and avoid tokenism?
My main suggestion for how to break down tokenism is to stop only talking about one side of the conversation. It's very, very easy to say Black Lives Matter. It's very, very easy to say we don't stand with racism and we stand with Black people, but more difficult to acknowledge white supremacy and systematic oppression. You see, tokenism becomes tokenism when, if you do something wrong, right, there's techniques to saying sorry. So if I do something wrong to somebody and I say I apologize rather than I'm sorry, there's technique to that. When I say I apologize, I'm doing it in a more formal way because I don't really want to, because I'm sorry feels more vulnerable. You get what I'm saying? And then when you name what you're sorry for, that's a different level. And a lot of times the reason why we can't accept this messaging is because the messaging lacks the verbiage that we're using to make our complaints. If I say I'm sick of the white supremacy, I'm sick of the systematic oppression, and you reply and say to me, yeah, we want to end racism, and you're not using the words I use to you. I need you to use the words that I use to you. I need you to acknowledge that white supremacy exists. And in a lot of the messaging that you've heard from various organizations that have spoken out about what Black people are going through, very few of them have actually said the words white supremacy, systematic oppression, or any of these other phrases. They don't use it because a lot of times they don't even know what it is, or they're not willing to own up to it because it's too scary a thing to own up to, because white supremacy makes it feel like everybody's complicit, right? And makes it feel more inbred and inherent in society. And so I think that one way to avoid tokenism is to not avoid calling our issues by what they are, and just saying things as they are. Because when you don't say things as they are, people go away feeling like you're more what they thought than before. You know what I mean? Sometimes somebody comes and gives you an apology and you feel more sour after the apology than you did prior to them coming to apologize because they didn't do it right. And I feel like the messaging matters. It's a big part of how you go forward. And then if you purposely hinder a community or understand that a community is purposely hindered, then you must purposely help. So don't just come with words, okay? Black people, in my opinion, we are simple. Give me money, give me opportunities, okay? I don't want words. I don't want false promises. I don't want tokenism. I don't want theirs and pats on the back. I'm hungry. Okay, it's very, I feel like it's very simple with us, because when you're dealing with survival, which is what we're dealing with, we want to survive, we want to stop being killed, right? And we want opportunities and we want money. It's very, very clear and concise and clean cut. When you cut out the nonsense, right? Rather than having a paragraph full of rubbish, you could have one sentence full of sense that would impact Black people more when you come across when you speak these messages, because it doesn't come across as tokenism when you're admitting to what the problem is and you bring in solutions. Clear.
I agree. I totally agree with that 100%. So what do you think the importance of allyship then is from different cultures?
Allyship is absolutely important, or we should just go home, as a lot of people tell us to do. If there's no point being in countries that are predominantly white without allyship. Do you understand what I'm saying? There are more of them than there are of us. If they don't like us, it doesn't work. If their systems don't incorporate us, it just don't work. We might as well go back and build our thing. And I always say, if everybody else rolls, I'll roll. That's what I always say. But yeah, I feel like allyship is absolutely important, because allyship is just about humanity. Allyship is just about you being able to acknowledge as a rational human being right and wrong. It's not a Black thing. It's not a, do you get what I'm saying? Because allyship just comes from anybody, any rational human being that can see that Black people are oppressed. And so I believe that allyship is important, because allyship is literally just on a mathematical level, more voices. Simple as, the more people speak, the more allies we have, the louder our voices are, the more impactful the voices are. So that's why allyship is important to me, because in my honest opinion, if there's no allyship, there's no point being here.
I agree. Chanel, do you want to add anything to that same point?
Thank you. No, I echo and agree with what Sideman is saying. It's really, really important. If you think about it purely numerically, and also thinking about it as, rather than doing a favor for the people for whom you've declared yourself an ally, but actually seeing it as something that is the right thing to do. So you're not kind of gifting them inclusion or gifting them your support, but actually it is the right thing to do. If there's somebody who has been held back and has had barriers put in front of them, helping to remove them and speak about those barriers, you're not giving them a gift per se, you're actually helping to bring about equality and equity and what is just and right. So kind of seeing it in that sense, you're not helping people and saving them, you're actually doing the right thing. I think that's a really important thing to focus on as well.
Thank you very much, both to Chanel and Sideman. Over to Emma. Emma, how can companies support young talent like yourself?
I would say definitely getting rid of this whole when it narrows down to, when it comes to an interview and you have two people who have the same qualifications, same experience, everything is very, very similar. And then it comes down to the last straw of like picking in between those two people and saying, oh, I'm going to decide to employ this one person because I feel like they'll fit into the team. I don't agree with that notion. I think it's so, I don't know if the word is like, it's just old fashioned. It just doesn't make any sense. It's almost like, it's just like saying that, basically, I almost feel like when you do say, I decide to employ this person because based on the fact that they'll fit into the team, it kind of goes down to, it kind of like pins down to what is it that they're fitting into. Like when you start to ask employers these questions, they start to say, oh, you know, we spoke about rugby, or we had something in common in terms of like a lot to do with like your outside hobbies outside of work. But then it's almost like, well, you've just lost somebody else who could have almost like brought like a complete difference to the team, and like almost kind of going back to what the panels were saying before about just bringing in like a completely like fresh new face and like somebody who comes from a completely different culture. Maybe they don't do the similar things that a lot of the people in your team do, because once you start narrowing it down to, oh, this person is a good fit for the team based on like stuff outside extracurricular activities or stuff that you do outside of work, you'll never really have almost a new viewpoint of ways of seeing things, or like even be educated in other aspects of life, like just because you kind of stick to the same group. And then you can start to see it trickling down in like everyone starts to look the same, everyone starts to like the same thing. And I think like it's just important to always like have like an open mind when it comes to employing staff. Just think about how, okay, maybe this person isn't really what I'm used to, I don't know, isn't really who I'd socialize with outside of work, but they're great for the team. They have new ideas. They would be, I don't know, they would just think outside of the box, instead of keeping the culture in like a narrow box to what it is. And I think that's probably the reason for why a lot of the times, sadly to say, people can't kind of see that there is like a clear divide. And you know, it's had to be up until this point where we're having this conversation where it should have been actually happening a long time ago. But yeah, I would just say with companies, definitely just have more of an open mind. Don't think I'm going to hire this person based on like social status or things like that, just because they fit in that box. Definitely think out the box. Think about somebody who does hit all those attributes that you want for the company, but then maybe not necessarily somebody you would necessarily think of like as a person who does the same thing within the group. So yeah, just having more of an open mind.
Absolutely, I agree. And a lot of the times when it does come to the decision process, it's a case of will they fit in? But I like the fact that you said about bringing something different to organisation or bringing something different to a group of people. I think it's important for companies to be taking more risks as such, and not just going from what they're used to, because like you said, everyone will start to look and behave the absolute same. So thank you so much for that.
Actually, sorry, one more point.
Yeah.
I was going to say as well, like even when someone actually brought this to my attention before, when you think about things like financially, whenever we've gone through a recession, and a lot of the times it was based on like the reasons of why we actually faced the recession, which obviously is inevitable, but the reasons being is usually down to group-based thinking. So if you think about it like that, it's actually best to have people who are individual, like who don't think in a group-based mindset, and actually can bring something completely new to the table, because then maybe you won't have to like go through certain challenges if you had somebody who's coming like out in front of you saying like, oh, like giving a new suggestion, bringing a new idea to the table than what the group would generally think of. So yeah, I'd say like companies definitely need to have like an open mind. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. Moving on to our next section right now, panelists, can each of you say one key measurable action that the audience can take away from today's discussion? Starting with Chanel.
I think a key measurable action could be for organizations to look at their recruitment process and tangibly look at the elements of it that favor the group that are overrepresented, and at all levels, especially at the senior levels, and make changes that would stop the group that are overrepresented from being overrepresented and actually move to a position where there's a full level of representation. Lots of organizations have done that in different ways. Do it in ways that make sense for your organization, but rather than saying, why don't Black people apply for jobs here, or why don't they ever make the shortlist, look at the actual process you have and make changes to it, and changes that make sense, and have voices in the room that will come with different ideas that are more representative to bring the representation into your organization.
Brilliant, thank you. Henry?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at the data. You definitely need to understand like what is the composition of your company, like what is the racial composition? And I think you need to have the data, and then you need to create a plan. So really similar to what Chanel said, it's really thinking about, like, you know, as an organization, as a business, you're always creating a plan. What is our plan for this year? What is our plan for the next 3 years? What is our strategic plan for the next 10 years? I think you should have your data, and you should plot out, well, what do we want this company to look like in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? And you should work to that plan. And that will involve things like what Chanel said, reevaluating your recruitment processes, looking at how you can attract more diverse talent, leveraging the talent that you already have in that organization so they can look at their network and recommend and refer people. You'll have to have a multi-pronged strategy that sits behind it. But if you don't have the data to start looking at it and thinking about it and recognizing there's a problem, then you have no place to start. So I would say that's the one tangible thing. If you don't have it, go get it. Ask the people who work there, who are members of, you know, minority communities, Black people in particular. Ask them what they feel. Ask them what they think. Get their honest feedback.
Thank you, Henry. And Sideman? Are you with us? You on mute?
My bad. Yeah, I'd say the takeaway that I would want companies to have from me is to start caring or start finding people that do. And the reason why I say that is that the time when companies were faceless organizations that were held to no moral standards is ending. If you haven't realized that, then you're going to miss the boat of how things are changing in business. People are holding businesses accountable the way you would hold your fellow man accountable. So it's either have a heart, find the heart, because it's heart that makes these things, push these things over the line. It's not policies, because policies are behind what the company's agendas are. If you only have a financial agenda, then you will only have protocols that fit a financial end goal. But if you have a moral agenda to come across correctly and to be seen right, then you will act differently, and your protocols will get to a finish line that matches that agenda. And as I said, it's either you're going to start caring, or care is going to start coming towards you, and you will realize now that people are now holding you accountable and saying, who is on the board? Questions that people never were asking before. They're asking, well, who's the board made up of? Who are the people making the decisions at this company? Why isn't there more Black representation? We want to see, people want to see. And if you continue to ignore this, it will become a larger and larger problem as people are becoming more aware. And you can't hide behind a brand name anymore and just say, oh yeah, we are this. And so because it's a massive organization, people get bewildered and don't hold you to moral account. Those times are changing. So I'd say get with the program.
Brilliant, thank you. And lastly, Emma.
Yeah, I was just going to say, kind of like in similar to what the panel just mentioned, I really like the idea of blind CVs. I think that's an amazing new just like aspect of like hiring people. So I think blind CVs is definitely the way forward. And I think just because like when you think about when you take away the actual like the name, there's been cases in the past where people have been looking at names and like kind of like discriminating against that, or like just different things, or like where you live even, things like that you can pick up on, like social status. I think when you take away those barriers, adding blind CVs to the mix will help like further everything. And just having corporations that actually care and actually are willing to listen and not ignore when you bring something to their attention, I think is, yeah, definitely the way forward.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your discussion. Massive thank you to all of our panelists today. All of these key takeaways can be implemented straight away. So for the audience, please take action and share the knowledge. So now we bring us on to our Q&A, and we've had some questions that have been feeding in as we've been on this discussion today. We've got one from Siren, and the question is, as a lead in my company, I've seen a lot of applicants come into the business, but not enough from BAME candidates. It just seems like either BAME candidates do not see our job adverts or do not want to apply. The issue is especially bad when looking for senior and leadership roles. How do we better reach BAME candidates, and are there things in which puts BAME candidates off applying for roles? anyone can take this question.
I can chip in a few different things. So I think the end of that question is a really important one about, is there anything that puts candidates, that could potentially be putting candidates off? And I think that's perhaps where a lot of the focus needs to sit for this particular organisation. You know, a lot of people speak about D&I, diversity, inclusion. The inclusion part needs to be focused on as well. And that's why earlier in an earlier answer, I said it's really important to be honest about your starting point. If your organisation at the moment is not racially representative and ethnically inclusive, how would somebody from a group that isn't already represented likely feel wanting to enter that organisation? That's something that has to be thought about. So as much as there are perhaps steps being taken to attract that talent, what's going to happen to them when they get into that organisation, I think is something that, name it, think about it, and actually have a plan and think about the best and most sensible way to communicate how they'll actually be safe in the space that previously isn't as representative as the country or the city or location of that organisation would expect it to be. So I think the work on not just attracting that talent, but when they get there, how are they going to feel? People are people with feelings, sentient beings. They're going to have a feeling about not wanting to perhaps be the only person. How can you also do things that assures people that they're not going to come into an organisation and be excluded or terrorised or feel a bit alone, which is not a feeling that most kind of humans, regardless of identity, would want to feel.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just looking at the chat now, and the chat is on fire. There's some really positive questions coming in. Another question we've got is real change happening in relation to black and people from ethnic backgrounds, or is it just a flash in the pan moment? Who would like to take this one?
Just on that flash in the pan moment thing, that's entirely up to us, really. We decide whether it's a flash in the pan moment or not. I'm not going to make it be a flash in the pan moment. I'm even sick of myself talking about this stuff now, but I'm still not going to stop talking. I'm just going to have to vomit and talk at the same time. But that's just my stance on it. We decide whether this is a flash in the pan moment. I think it's already gone longer than people expected. Because I think that a lot of people have been empowered to speak, and I'll tell you, for me, I don't know if I can ever go back to just not speaking again, because I never knew I could feel so free.
Yeah, I agree. Another question we've got here is, how do we encourage genuine engagement from senior leaders on this topic? Henry, do you want to jump on this one?
Yeah, I definitely can. I think, like, certainly this moment that we're talking about has really, I think, ignited a lot of people's attention, right? Including a lot of senior leaders in organizations who maybe didn't care or didn't know how to broach the topic, or maybe, you know, they had other considerations. And so I think, you know, we really already do have a kind of captive audience. How do we keep that momentum? I think we have to continue to talk about it. We have to continue to raise it when there are issues. I think, you know, there are strength in numbers. If you have numbers in your organization, you know, I think the work that Black at Apple does in representing, you know, employees that are Black at Apple, like, we will always speak up, and we will always make sure that we stay on the agenda of our senior leaders. And if you see us, you know, if you see the topic fall off the agenda, put it back on. Speak to somebody to put it back on. Speak to your manager, speak to their manager. Make sure that you're working your way all the way up to the highest person you can contact to make sure that they haven't forgotten that you're still here, that more people like you deserve to be here, and that you want to see the plan. You want to know what's going on. And so I think for sure that, to me, is the way that you kind of you keep senior leaders engaged. You make sure that it doesn't fall off their agenda.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got another question.
Just want to say sorry about
what, sorry?
I just wanted to say sorry about my connection earlier.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's been all right so far. Question 3, will companies be measured on the percentage of Black people in senior roles help drive change, like the transparency between gender and pay? Sideman, can you jump on this one?
Drop that one again for me, please.
Will companies be measured on the percentage of Black people in senior roles help drive change, like the transparency now provided on gender and pay?
100%. As I said, where our, you know what I've come to learn, can you guys hear me? All right, just checking.
Yeah,
because I'm on my
perfectly
phone.
fine.
What I've come to learn is that companies are people, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I didn't realize this at first until I got behind the company and realized, oh, they really do let people in depending on who they favor, who they like, who they had a good interaction with at a meeting, how the person came across. So if we have more people representing us in these corporate spaces, then decisions will be made that help us because people have our aligned interests. It's just as simple as that. And I think that's what is so important about representation, is because naturally, what we care about will be more reflected in the entire business model because we're in the business. So the more of us there is, the better it's going to be across the board. But that being said, what a lot of companies do, as I said, is they hire mouthpieces. They hire Black people that they feel like, you know what, yeah, he'll stay in line, she'll stay in line. And so when you hire Black people, right, but you do not give them the freedom to exercise their voice, you have achieved nothing. You've achieved nothing but to blind and to trick, and it's just a smokescreen. You have to allow your Black employees to feel free enough to speak. If you're going to have, if you see all of this stuff happening, whether it's the George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement, and then you call in all your Black employees to have a conversation with the bosses, we are already afraid. We are already afraid of being fired. We have a set fear of being afraid of being fired. That such meetings, for number one, need to be conducted by people that look like us. But even if they can't be, the first thing that needs to be set forward is, listen, you can't get fired for this. We want you to be as open and as honest as possible, because what you will find is people that are afraid to speak because they're afraid of being judged and seen differently because of speaking. So you have to you can't just have Black voices, you have to also amplify and give them the freedom to speak.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sideman. This question, I'm going to kind of summarize. As a person of colour, I've seen in my surroundings how so many people get disheartened and give up on applying or just lack the confidence. How do we build up those people and best support them? Emma, can you try and answer that one? Would you want to read it out again?
Yeah, no, I can answer it. So yeah, I mean, I've been through a lot of different scenarios where I have faced a lot of difficulties and barriers within the workplace because of the color of my skin. So I would just say, honestly, just keep, like, I took a couple of years out and started up my own business and from the corporate world because it was a lot to deal with. But I think, like, just kind of like know your worth, know your value within yourself, and don't put your value within the company, put your value within the mission, and just keep on moving forward. I think, like, as long as you kind of like put into the factors into place of like always making sure that you in a way like back yourself up or support yourself, just because you need to, like, obviously don't go into the corporation blindfolded, but just continue like to push forward, because I think it's kind of sad if another company or like scenarios or people within, or the toxicity within a company kind of like takes away your dreams or like what you've kind of been called here to do, and you might be that same person that will be able to make the change. So yeah, just keep pushing forward, and if you can, try and sort like mentorship within the company, and if companies can, actually it would be great to introduce mentorship, like we mentioned earlier, for people who actually do have like similarities, or people who almost like, if I was to come into a corporation, I would feel a lot more comfortable maybe speaking maybe to a woman or something different, like where you just have like similar interests. So yeah, just aligning like definitely like mentors with the right mentees, and yeah, just keep pushing forward and being confident.
Thank you very much, Emma. And the final question we've got: has diversity and inclusion become a mere marketing tactic to build company brands? How do we measure diversity and inclusion? Chanel, can you answer this one?
Yeah, thank you. I think the answer for that for me is probably a bit of both. So for some organizations, some companies, it is a mere marketing tactic. And for others, there has been a genuine move towards increased diversity, inclusion, representation. And for those organizations, it's a positive thing. And they're seeing it as a long road that they're still on. And I think perhaps some of the things that separate the two sides are genuine intention and genuine care. Which harks back to something that Sideman says earlier. I think that is definitely something that separates the two sides. Are Black lives, Black voices, Black creativity centered, or are they kind of not centered by the company or organization? Is it like a short-term performance or virtual signal, or is there actually a long-term action plan that there's commitment from everybody and it doesn't rest on the Black people in that organization to continue to push it forward and keep re-adding it to an agenda that it keeps mysteriously dropping off from? Also, have the results been published before the systematic change occurs? So has that organisation declared themselves an ally, anti-racist, before they've actually done the work to get themselves to that place? Because that shouldn't happen. The work should happen first, of course. Are Black people and making decisions, or people making declarations on behalf of Black people? We know this is what Black people want, and this is what we've decided to do. Are Black voices heard in that process? And also, is there victim blaming? Like, why aren't Black people coming to us, and why aren't Black people climbing up the ladder? Or are actually companies taking ownership in their stake in the role and actually changing that around, moving forward in a positive way that has that elicits the outcomes that are desirable and make a place for Black people, remove the barriers that are in front of Black people, and actually make the whole thing more representative and inclusive?
Much appreciated, Chanel. Thank you very much. Does anyone want to say any wrapping kind of thoughts or feelings on the chat before I close?
Yeah, I just wanted to actually mention, going on off the last question that you asked, Director Chanel. I think from experience that I've had, there are some companies, like you mentioned earlier, that are almost doing it in terms of almost just like a facade kind of thing. And I think it's kind of sad that some of these companies who do these things kind of have people that do look like us, all over their website and stuff. But then once you join, there is a lack of diversity. So I think just going off of that, it would be great if anybody's listening out there who are from corporations to really just try and push forward being more diverse and hiring people who you would not necessarily hire usually, just to push your company forward. And there are so many benefits, as we have mentioned. So yeah, it'd just be great for it to not just be a trend just for this moment, but for it to be something that's a long-term thing that companies are truly invested in.
Thank you very much, Emma. And thanks to all the audience for your questions, and thanks to our amazing panelists for giving us their time on such an important matter. As I said at the beginning, let's not only educate ourselves and have open discussions and conversations, but let's take away some measurable actions to implement within our companies today and make a real change for the next generation of young people. If you have any remote roles over the UK or jobs within the Greater Manchester area, please get in touch with the Get Hired team. We have our innovative recruitment event online for you to hire our amazing Prince's Trust talent. Thank you for today, and thank you to our amazing panelists, and thank you for joining me, Keeman, on behalf of myself and the whole of the Prince's Trust. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.